Hello everybody, thank you for joining me once again. Root Beer here, and I'm going to be starting another look at another Canadian Intermediate Math Contest, or CIMC. So you may remember this contest is aimed at grades 9 and 10, although if you're younger, feel free to write. Just don't expect to get too far, because some questions do rely on grade 9 and 10 curriculum. Okay? That's not always the case, not for every question, and certainly if you've been reading ahead, you might get far. But let's take a look at this contest. As usual, if you'd like a copy, you can click the first link in the description, download, try it for yourself. I do always try and recommend that. So the CIMC, just like the CSMC, the senior contest, they're both written in November. They're similar in feel to sort of the Euclid contest. They're great practice for it. They're 2 hours long, as opposed to the Euclid's 2.5 hours. But like the Euclid, there's a healthy mix of you just need the final answer, so that's part A questions, and questions where you have to explain what's going on. Major differences between this and, say, the Euclid, which is one a lot of people are familiar with, is that the final answer questions are worth less. They're only 5 marks as opposed to 10 marks for the written stuff, and the questions are separated. Part A is all the I don't want to say easy because usually A5 and A6 are a little challenging, but the sort of light bulb, the just need final answer questions are all grouped together in Part A, and Part B is all the written questions. Okay. As with most Waterloo contests, calculators are allowed, but it's got to be subject to restrictions. No graphing calculators, no smartphones, no iPads, nothing like that. Okay. So as with my usual series, we're just going to do one question per video. Just as a sort of word, if you practice these, you sort of develop your own rhythms. My recommendation for doing both the intermediate or the senior contest is first to probably try 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4 in Part A. 5 and 6 tend to be quite hard, so I would skip over them for a moment. Read them, and if you think you can get 5, go for it. If you think you know what's going on with 6, do a little work on that. But don't expect to get 5 and 6 before you get something like B1. So I would say A1, A2, A3, maybe A4 if this isn't your first contest. Then try B1. And then it's a toss-up. Do you do B2 or A5 and that sort of thing. B3 is typically the hardest question on the contest, but I found B2 is not always particularly harder than some of the A-part questions. Anyways, that aside, let's jump into the very first question, question number 1. Which of the fractions 2/3, 3/4, 5/6, 5/8, and 11/12 is the smallest? Okay. Now, we're allowed to use calculators, so, why don't we just grab our calculator and compute these? And you can. We just need a final answer. We don't need to explain anything. But I'm going to try and shy away from the calculator, as I tend to. And I'm just going to grab my pen and do some calculations, okay? So we've got 2/3, 3/4, 5/6, 5/8, and 11/12. Okay, well, let's crack open the notepad, and I'll copy those down. Now, all but one of these numbers follows a very interesting... I know we've got 5/8, so I'm going to write him off to the side. But just take a look at these 4 right here. They're very special in that the numerator is 1 less than the denominator. So I could rewrite 2/3 as 1 minus 1/3. We got 1 minus 1/4, 1 minus 1/5, and 1 minus... oops, not 1/5, that should be 1/6. And this one here should be 1/12. Okay. And if you view it this way, you might have difficulty comparing 2/3 to 5/6. But when you compare them this way, they're all being subtracted from 1. The smallest of these 4 will be the one that takes away the biggest amount from 1. And most people will more easily be able to say, well, 1/3 is bigger than 1/4, 1/6, and 1/12. So that tells me right now 2/3 is the smallest number. I just really need to compare 2/3 and 5/8 and ask myself, well, which one of these is the smallest? Okay, so that's one thing that caught my eye. Another thing that caught my eye is that 3, 4, 6, 12, 8, these are all factors of 24. So if I wanted to compare these guys more readily, I could give them all just a common denominator of 24. I'll do that in a moment. But I want to compare 2/3, and 5/8. How do I tell, is it this sign? Is it the other one? What's going on? Well, the easiest way to compare just two fractions on their own, if you don't have common denominator, is to do what is called cross multiply. So we put sort of this symbol in here. We don't really know whether or not that one's true, but I'm going to multiply everything by 8 on both sides, and then 3 on both sides. So we really sort of multiply everything by 24, again bringing in that common denominator. But if I multiply over here, sort of you get 8 times 2 and 3 times 5, you get 16 less than 15. Now that obviously isn't true. So we see now 16 is greater than 15. And so that means that the fractions are the wrong way around as well. So 5/8 is less than 2/3. And since 2/3 was the least amongst all these 4 numbers, we know that 5/8 is the least, is the smallest. Okay, now I said you could also do it finding a common denominator, so let's just do it a completely different way. It's always a good idea to have different approaches in our toolkit. So let's instead get a common denominator of 24. Okay. By the way, you can do this while with your calculator, and you'll get the right answer, but you won't have a lot of work to show for it. Now, for 1A or A1, I guess, that's not too bad an issue. Okay, you don't really need to show your work for any of the A-part questions. As long as you're right, you get full 5 marks. But if you're wrong and you haven't put any work, you get nothing. And as someone who's been in the marking room, we do check, and a lot of people get some of the later A-part questions wrong, and if you don't leave any marks, that's nothing. We tend to be quite generous, and you can get marks just for little observations. So even if you don't know how to do A6, writing down what you know, making observations can still get you marks. Okay? And if you're one of those people who wants to maximize your score, that's something to take note of. So, doing one of these sorts of explanations, writing it a bit more clearly, would get you marks even if you accidentally did 5/8. You accidentally said 2/3 was the smallest instead of 5/8. They would still be able to see some of your work. All right, or showing your work as how we get a common denominator. So 2/3, we multiply top and bottom by 8. We get 16 over 24. 3/4 is when we multiply top and bottom by 6, so we get 18 over 24. 5/6 is the same when we multiply top and bottom by 4. 5/8, just putting them back in proper order, multiply top and bottom by 3. And finally, 11/12, multiply top and bottom by 2, and we get 22 over 24. Now, when we have common denominators, it's very easy to compare. We just look at the numerators. Who has the smallest numerator? Well, 5/8. 5/8 has the smallest numerator, so 5/8 is the smallest. So there, we sort of did 2 ways to do this one. Very standardized, get a common denominator way of doing it, or little things that catch our eye and then quick comparison between a couple fractions. You could, of course, generalize this comparison method. You can check all pairs of fractions as you go, but that's sort of inefficient. Okay. But however you did it, we get 5/8. We've got 5/8 in 2 different ways. They don't care how many ways you get the question as long as you just get it right. So that's question 1 there. So hopefully we got 5 marks to our name now. And in the next video, we're going to take a look at question number 2. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.